Dr. Kannan, Joint Secretary of FSS IMA of Tamil Nadu for today's CME for briefing about the Family Security Scheme. Over to IMA prayer by Dr. Supriya. Hello.
Supriya, unmute, madam. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Physician prayer. Dear Lord, thou great physician, I kneel before thee, since every good and perfect gift must come from thee. I pray, give skills to my hand, clear vision to my mind, kindness and sympathy to my heart. Give me singleness of purpose, strength to lift at least a part of the burden of the suffering fellow men, and a true realization of the rare privileges mine. Take from my heart all guile and worldliness, that with simple faith of a child, I rely on thee. I am a prayer. May everybody be happy. May everybody be healthy. May everybody be free from pain. May everybody free from sorrow. May be the healing cure beyond every greed and lure. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Hello.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, all members. I want to brief something about regarding COVID vaccination. Being a district immunization officer of Chennai, I like to share some points. Overall, Chennai, we have vaccinated around 6.5 lakhs beneficiaries. That we are giving more importance to elderly beneficiaries. That is 45 plus with comorbid and 60 plus. All are eligible to get vaccination. That is an ongoing program. We have 411 sessions all over Chennai, including private hospitals. And as well as in GCC, we are having 140 urban primary health center and 20 urban community health center and 171 private hospitals, plus all major government institutions we are vaccinating. This is for your kind information. We have both Covaxin as well as Covishield. But for the past 3 days, Covaxin we have short supply. Shortly, it will be coming another within 3 to 4 days. We'll be receiving the stock. It will be supplied to entire Chennai. Please get vaccinated. Motivate all beneficiaries, preferably above 45 with comorbid, and 60 plus needs to be vaccinated. And shortly, that is from April 1st onwards, we are planning to vaccinate all the people above 45 years. Please get vaccinated, be safe. Since the case is on the rising trend, I want excellent cooperation from all our members. You please share your family members in groups to get vaccination, so that let us all be in safe hands. Thank you, ma. Over to presidential address, Dr. Jayaraman sir.
Thank you, madam. Very good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I thank the today's sponsor Soumya ma'am for this wonderful webinar. So I welcome everyone to participate in this webinar. This is our regular CME program. So last month, we had it in our in-person meeting in the hotel. Because COVID case increasing and a lot of other issues, will be again starting the webinar virtual CME program. So today we have eminent speakers from our KMC, Kilpatrick Medical College, Dr. Vasudha Kumar. Welcome, Vasudha Kumar. And before starting CME, a brief announcement about this our health days. This month we have a lot of health days. There is International Women's Day, World Tuberculosis Day, World Sleep Day, World Kidney Day. A lot of awareness program for the update on each and every specialty systems. So we have our lot of specialty wing like College of General Practitioner, and there is AMS, Academy of Medical Sciences, and the Academy of IME wing. So I am one of the member in that, and I am the member of IME headquarters of TB committee. NTB committee. That Muthurajan sir is the vice chairman of our zone. So we have a lot of committees to fight against all the deadly diseases. From the respective point of view, this month we have 2 days. One is the World Tuberculosis Day, March 24th, and the World Sleep Day on March 19th. So today I'll be addressing briefly about the World Sleep Day and World Tuberculosis Day. And we have another guest speaker, Dr. Vasudha Kumar, senior assistant professor. He'll be speaking on the approach to COVID management, and a few announcements. Already, madam, our Honorary Secretary, Dr. Hemlata Madam, mentioned about the COVID vaccination. Madam is in charge of Chennai Immunization Officer, Chennai District Immunization Officer, and the Madam is Nodal Officer for the immunization program. And so we request everyone, first of all, our healthcare people to take vaccinations and tell your patients and your family, friends. So vaccine is the only protective agent against the COVID-19. So luckily we have vaccinations. I request everyone give awareness talk to various peoples and patients, friends, family, and spread the messages to take vaccinations in a rapid way. Then only we can control the second wave, third wave, fourth wave and all. So very important. Now we are all facing a second wave of COVID surge because of the mutant corona and variant corona, and a lot of issues going on. So some other places, locally, some other areas, they put some lockdown in other states like Maharashtra and all. So I request everyone be safe and practice safely, wear the mask, N95 mask, seeing the patients, including staff nurse and our healthcare clinic and hospitals. I request everyone follow the COVID strategy like SMS, sanitization, mask, and the social distancing, along with vaccinations, plays a major role. And a few announcement. I request every member to bring new members to our IMA to increase our membership drive. This is very, very important. And we have a lot of schemes available in our IMA. I request every member kindly take the scheme, utilize the scheme, mainly the family security scheme, FSS1 and FSS2, for which we have our new joint secretary, Dr. Kamalakan Sir is here. Sir is going to address about 10 to 15 minutes about FSS and PPLSS and all. I request everyone, please enroll in a family security scheme 1 and 2 and PPLSS. That is Professional Protection Linked Social Security Scheme. These are all a very important, very good scheme for our profession, our family, our practice, all important. I request everyone, please enroll, join this scheme. Very, very important, very good for our this thing. And we have so many webinar IMA meetings are attending. So I request everyone just to go through our TIMO journal. It's a wonderful journal. It contains all the updates about various committees, various new leaders here. And we have a very good TIMO journal. This journal is available now, e-journal. So I request everyone kindly go through the TIMO journal. You log in imatn.com, our website, our official website. You can read and so many information about the latest kind of thing. In this book, our state president message, our honorary secretary message, and the finance secretary message, state president-elect message. There are a lot of very good thing, and we have various two-page topic update on International Women's Day celebration, Tuberculosis Day, and Sleep Day about various things. I request everyone please go through. And we have a lot of committee, fine arts committee, sports committee, so various leaders. So we can easily contact and update yourself with this committee. So I request everyone kindly go through this e-journal. There is officially also, there is hard copy also available. If you want, you can pay through this particular app is here, and you can apply through a secretary or president to get the journal. Otherwise, we are all going to have the e-journal, TIMO journal. It's a very, very wonderful journal. Kindly go through everything. This is equal to our central journal. I request everyone kindly go through that, and request everyone increase our membership drive. I request everyone to join the our various schemes and other things and all, and take vaccines periodically and attend all our IMA meetings, webinar programs to improve your update your knowledge periodically. So tell your patients, friends, family about the vaccination strategy. Any queries, so we can discuss in detail with a lot of fear, worries about something, some adverse reactions and all. So you can explain in your patient's family very neat manner. Such a way we can improve and we can control the COVID-19 infections. So with that, I come to the conclusion that, so very good afternoon to everyone. So over to the Madam Secretary for further proceedings. Thank you, Madam. No issue. May I request Dr. Kamalakannan Sir. Kamalakannan Sir is the Joint Secretary of the Family Security Scheme, and Sir is the former President of our Ambuttur Avadi IMA branch, and currently Sir is the Honorary Secretary of IMA Mohappir, and Sir is a very senior consultant, cosmetic and ENT surgeon. And Sir has a wonderful, vast knowledge about all our schemes, mainly the PPLSS. Sir is a Chennai district coordinator of PPLSS, and currently Sir is the Joint Secretary of the Family Security Scheme. I request Dr. Kamalakannan Sir to share your presentation and start your presentation, sir. Over to Dr. Kamalakannan Sir. Hemlata ma'am.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Just welcome Dr. Kamalakaran, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I welcome Dr. Kamalakaran, Joint Secretary, Family Security Scheme of IMA Tamil Nadu. Please share your views regarding family security scheme, sir. I welcome, sir. Hello.
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir, to our CME program. Welcome, sir. Sir, Dr. Kamalakaran, sir.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, madam. You are able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the
Yes,
voice
sir.
is also, and the audio is also clear? Okay.
Clear,
Yes,
clear,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Clear.
sir.
Okay. This is regarding the family security scheme. Once in 2 years, elections are conducted to family security, both for FSS and PPLSS. And the term of the previous office bearers is getting over by 31st of March. And the elections were conducted, and new set of office bearers are taking over from the 1st of April. And actual taking over might happen after the Tamil Nadu elections, which is happening on the first week of April. So after 6th, we are expecting that the FSS office to change from Erode to Marthandam. And the new president is Dr. Venkatesan, and new secretary is Dr. Solomon Jaya of Marthandam. So FSS office is being shifted from Erode to Marthandam. So I'll be giving the address of that office for that new FSS office. And the elections were recently conducted, and the results have been announced, and the new team is taking over from the 1st of April. Regarding the FSS scheme, I happen to be previously I was a district coordinator Thiruvallur, now got elected as a joint secretary IMA TNSP from the FSS. I also happen to be a district coordinator for PPLSS in Chennai. This is the FSS promotional video. And this is another important slide for every member who happens to be a member of PPLSS and FSS. Any accidental death happening to the member, the family stands to get benefited by around about 29 lakhs and 50,000. This is how the split up works. If the death happens due to the COVID, the IMA Action Fund 2 lakhs is given from the INA Tamil Nadu State Board, and 50,000 from the PPLSS scheme, and 18 lakhs from the FSS1 scheme, and 9 lakhs from another in the FSS2 scheme. Everything put together works out to 29 lakhs and 50,000. For if you happen to be a member of all the schemes. Apart from this, the Tamil Nadu government has promised 25 lakhs. So far, the paperwork is going on, and IMA has recommended, and the 41 people have applied for the same. The 41 families have applied for the same, and IMA has recommended 41 names, and the file is going on within the Tamil Nadu government circles, and they are yet to decide whether to give it from the CM Relief Fund or Disaster Management Fund. So it is in the final stages, irrespective of the government change. And we are expecting good news from that score. So 41 families will stand to get benefited, and another 25 lakhs will be paid from the government of Tamil Nadu. And the file is in the final stages. Apart from the 29.5 lakhs, which IMA Tamil Nadu is giving, we are expecting another 25 lakhs from government of Tamil Nadu. And 41 families have been recommended for the same from IMA Tamil Nadu to government of Tamil Nadu. And the file is in the final stages. So we are expecting the results very soon. And we are expecting the positive news irrespective of the government change. And this is another important slide. Like in 2018 in FSS1, we collected for 60 deaths of 12,000 rupees. And although 86 deaths happened in 2018, in 2019, we collected for 60 deaths of 12,000 rupees, and 76 deaths happened in that year. Like because of that COVID-19, in 2020, there happened 139 deaths. 139 deaths. And that also includes like 41 deaths, which I already mentioned, which are RT-PCR positive or radiologically positive. Apart from that, the regular deaths which happen like 80 to 90 deaths. In addition to that, another 41 deaths put together. Last year, we collected for 70 deaths of 14,000 rupees in 2020, but 139 families have benefited from the scheme last year. Yeah, but the things look a little bit rosy in 2021. As of now, from January 1st till today being March 28, almost 3 months over, we are just having only 13 deaths, 13 deaths, and we are expecting the death rate by the end of this year to be around about 75 to 80. So we are expecting that 26th, now that we are paying the 26th premium, we are paying around about 20,000 rupees or for 100 deaths, 10 deaths. So we are expecting the 27th premium to come down, provided the second and third wave doesn't hit as bad as what it's been doing in Europe and USA. This year, as of now, in 26th premium in 2021, we have only 13 deaths, 13 deaths. And the 26th premium, we are collecting rupees 20,000 rupees. This collection started from November of 2020 onwards last year. And so far, almost 5,700 people have already paid. The last date to pay the 26th premium without fine is 31st of March. And then from then on, for every 3 months, 200 rupees is collected as a late fee. And almost 2/3 of the members of the total members present in FSS1 scheme have already paid up of the 20,000 rupees. And when difficulties, to avoid the difficulties faced by the members of paying 20,000 rupees in one go, IMA Tamil Nadu State Board deliberated on this issue. And now that you can pay in 2 installments of 10,000 rupees, one before June and one after June of this year. But even before that announcement has come, almost 2/3 of the members have already paid. That is 20,000 rupees of the 26th premium in FSS. That is more than 5,700 members. And very soon, in the next 1 week, we are expecting another 1,000 members to pay up before the office being shifted from Erode to Marthandam. The third premium of FSS2, which is due from the July 2020, however, stays at 12,000 rupees only. We are collecting for 40 deaths in FSS2 every year. That is 300 for every deaths. And likewise, for 40 deaths, we are collecting 12,000 rupees. Last year, so far in FSS2, we had 43 deaths. So FSS2 is reasonably doing well when compared to FSS1. This is a health benefit scheme which was introduced a couple of years back. Like a member, if he is alive at the age of 80 and he has paid up all his dues in FSS, both in FSS 1 and 2, he can take back the entire money paid by him as an annual premium, right from the date of inception, right from the date of joining till date. Whatever money he has paid to the scheme, both in FSS 1 and FSS 2, he can take back the entire money at the age of 80 in 2-3 installments. Based on these medical needs, it can be taken up into 2-3 installments. This money will be deducted from the final settlement paid to the first nominee as and when the death of the member occurs. So this money taken as a loan, interest-free loan at the age of 80, will be deducted from the final payment paid to the first nominee as and when the death of the member occurs. This is the scheme, which is a health benefit scheme. So far, 3 to 4 members have benefited from the scheme. I must confess here, there are not many members, although we have around about 9,400 members in FSS1 and another 3,000 members in the FSS2. Only 186 members are of above 80 years and 80 years and above. And out of which 3 to 4 members have benefited from the scheme so far. The defaulters in FSS1, totaling about 701 members, have been debarred from joining in FSS2 in future. Last year, in 2019, 26 members were removed for defaulting on payment. In last year, 2020, 41 members were removed. There were enough time were given and multiple number of calls were been made to them. We spoke to them, all the district coordinators, the president and secretary of the local branches, they spoke to the individual members, but still they didn't pay up. And a registered post has been sent as to ask why their name should not be removed from the scheme. After giving enough long rope, 41 members have been removed from the scheme last year. The window period for the FSS scheme. The window period for a new member joining in FSS 1 is 1 year. The window period for a new member joining in FSS 2 is 1 year. But the window period for an existing FSS 1 member who wants to join in FSS 2 is 6 months. This is the general rules for joining in FSS 1 and 2. These are common both for FSS 1 and 2. Below age of 30, he has to pay a non-refundable deposit of 3,000 plus another 20,000 rupees as the first year payment. Between 30 and 31 years and 40 years, he has to pay 10,000 rupees as a non-refundable deposit plus another 20,000 rupees as a first year payment. If the person happens to be between 41 and 50 years, he has to pay 50,000 rupees as a non-refundable deposit plus another 20,000 rupees as a first year payment. In FSS 2, the upper age limit for FSS 1 is 50 years, 50 years. In FSS 2, the upper age limit to join is 60 years. Say, for example, a 53-year-old person who wants to join in FSS 2, he has to pay 53,000 as a non-refundable deposit, plus another 12,000. In the FSS 2, the annual premium is 12,000. So he has to pay 53,000 plus another 12,000 as the first year payment. So likewise, for a 59-year-old person, a 59,000 has to be paid as a non-refundable deposit plus another 12,000 as the first year payment. This is as far as the entry fees in both FSS 1 and 2 are concerned. And the FSS 1 data, like as on current data, we have 9,432 members. This is live membership, total membership. And 701 member has been deleted for non-payment. Their names have been removed from the scheme. And 858 deaths have happened in FSS 1 so far, right from the date of inception till date. In other words, 858 families have benefited from the scheme so far. And amounting to rupees, I'll come to that later. And last year, 41 members have been removed from that scheme. In FSS 2, we have 2,948 members. And last year, the death rate is in FSS 2 is 43 deaths so far. In FSS 2, it is 3 years since we started the scheme, and so far 109 deaths have happened. So in other words, 109 families have benefited from the scheme. And then last year, the new members in FSS 1 and 2 are, in FSS 1, 106 members joined in last year in 2020. In FSS 2, another 156 members joined the scheme. And this is another important part of this slide. Here in FSS 1, 858 families have benefited so far, right from the date of inception till date. And amounting to rupees 133 crores has been disbursed from the FSS scheme and IMA Tamil Nadu State Board to their individual families. I repeat, 858 families have benefited so far, right from the start in 2004 till date. And amounting to rupees 133 crores have been disbursed from the FSS 1 to their individual families. In FSS 2, so far, it is 3 years since we started the FSS 2. So far, 109 families have benefited and 8.49 crores have been disbursed from the FSS 2 scheme so far. Put together, almost 140 crores have been disbursed from the scheme to the individuals concerned. The total fixed deposit as on date in FSS 1 is 7.73 crores. In FSS 2 is 23.08 crores. Put together, we have around about 30.82 crores as fixed deposit. And last year, we paid around about 1.9 crore as income tax in FSS, only in FSS scheme. These are all the documents needed for claiming both in FSS 1 and FSS 2. The original membership certificate and the photos, the copy of the death certificate and the Aadhaar card, the request letter and the photo from the first nominee along with this Aadhaar card, last paid receipt, and the document must be sent through the local branch secretary. And this is the affidavit in case the member dies and then they are not able to trace his original FSS certificate. The nominees, the first and second nominee, they both together, they have to sign a form like this from the notary public to have his application processed. This is another form by which a member who is very much hale and healthy, but he lost his original FSS certificate. He has to go about this way. This indemnity form from the notary public, he has to fill it up, and he has to pay a nominal amount of 1,000 rupees to get a new certificate, duplicate certificate, FSS certificate. And the total members in IMA Vilivakam Ayanavaram as on date is 274, out of which only about 39 members are present in the FSS 1. And maybe another 10 to 12 members are present in FSS 2 scheme. And maybe 7 to 8 members are present in both the schemes. And there is quite a large room for improvement in IMA Vilivakam Ayanavaram. Total members is 274, out of which only 39 members are FSS scheme, are present in FSS. These are all the members in the major branches like Madurai, Coimbatore, Salem, Trichy, and Erode, like Dindigul, Nagarkoil, Tambaram, Kodambakkam, Thanjavur, and Tirunelveli. And this is the new set of office bearers who are taking over from the 1st of March in 2021, and the FSS office being shifted from Erode to Marthandam. Dr. B. Venkateshan of Dharmapuri, he happens to be the chairman. Dr. S. Ganeshan from Tiruvannamalai, he is the vice chairman. Dr. Solomon Jaya from Marthandam, he is the secretary. And it is in his place, Rainbow Children's Women and Children Hospital, Marthandam. It is in his place, the FSS office is getting transferred. And treasurer is Dr. S.K. Anup of also of Marthandam. Apart from me, Dr. Balu is also a joint secretary. Internal Lottery Committee Chairman is Dr. Abdul Quddus, and Internal Lottery Committee members are Dr. Chandran and Dr. A.R. Sambat. And this is the office communication address. As of now, the FSS office is very much functioning in Erode. It is yet to getting, once the Tamil Nadu elections are over, the process will take another week or 10 days. So only then it gets shifted to Marthandam. As of now, the FSS office is very much functioning in Erode. And the address for the new communication, once the office gets shifted to Marthandam, is Dr. Solomon Jaya is the honorary secretary for FSS, Williams Children's Hospital, Main Road, Marthandam, Kanyakumari district. This is the new address for the FSS office for the next 2 years. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
For the wonderful information. And, we have a lot of thing to achieve in FSS scheme. I request everyone, I try to enroll the members to enroll in FSS 1, FSS 2 schemes, sir. Definitely, I'll achieve all our this thing. So thank you very much for the wonderful thing. So any queries you will ask appropriately, sir. Thank you very much, Kamalakandan, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
you. Okay. Next, we'll move on to the CME program. Today, we have an eminent speaker from Keelpark Medical College, my friend, Dr. M. Vasanta Kumar, Senior Assistant Professor. Welcome, Vasanta Kumar, Senior Assistant Professor, KMC.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, friends.
College mate from Tirunelveli Medical College, and we did together in DTCD in Institute of Thoracic Medicine, Madras Medical College. And Vasant did MD General Medicine in Chengalpattu Medical College, and right now, currently is working as a Senior Assistant Professor in Keelpark Medical College. So Vasant is very much interested in diabetology and the COVIDology. You all know very well, for the past 1 year, he has done enormous work on COVID, diagnosis, management and all, for IMA also. So Vasant and myself, predominant work is Vasant only. It's a write-up, article is ready, is going to publish from our IMA side, that is COVID and respiratory comorbidities. So I thank you, my sincere thank to Vasant on behalf of IMA. So another couple of weeks, this is going to publish in a separate journal, special journal for the COVIDology with the various specialties and all. So I thank you, Vasant. Vasant today is going to present on approach to the management of COVID-19. You all know very well about that. For the past 1 year, we are struggling with the COVID-19, a lot of lockdown and economic, very downturn. We have suffering a lot from all the professions. School and all leave, college, everything is leave. We're all video consultation, a lot of people work from the home. We're a lot of struggling. Now we're all facing a second wave. Luckily, we have vaccinations. I do not know how far it's going to prevent second or third wave. So for that, we have expertise. Dr. Professor Vasanta Kumar is going to give a talk on approach to management of COVID-19. So without wasting much time, I hand over the platform to Vasant. Over to Vasant.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will share the, just a minute, sir. Thank you for the nice introduction, sir. Good afternoon, one and all. I am Dr. Vasanta Kumar, Senior Assistant Professor, working in the Department of General Medicine, Government Kilpauk Medical College, Chennai.
Vasant, make it to slideshow.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
fine.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, as you know, cases are surging again, and we are already into the second wave of pandemic. So, I hope that everyone will find this discussion helpful and useful. This presentation is based on my experience gained from my hospital. I have made this presentation very simple and realistic. This is a very simple approach. Okay. So move on to the topic. So these are all the heading under which we are going to discuss all these points. So number 1, introduction. Number 2, natural course of infection, presentation of disease, categorization of patients, management, and take home point. Introduction. So as we all know, the manifestation of COVID is a spectrum. At one end, we have completely asymptomatic cases. And at the other end, we have severe disease with ARDS and respiratory failure. So we don't know who will develop severe disease. Similarly, there are many drugs available to treat COVID-19. We all know that steroids and low molecular weight heparin and oxygen are the cornerstone of treatment, but we may not be knowing when to start all these drugs. So, dear friends, we shall discuss all these points in detail now. So, before that, to know the answer, you must understand the natural course of infection, disease behavior, knowledge on the day of illness, knowledge on the type of presentation. These are all important so that we can treat the patient effectively. So understand the natural course of illness and behavior of the disease. Disease behavior varies greatly from person to person. As I have explained already, so in some person it is completely asymptomatic, some person it is very severe. So we have to understand the natural course of illness and disease behavior. Knowledge on the day of illness is very much important. That is, the day of illness means the day from the onset of first symptom is very much important. For example, suppose on 4th day you are doing investigations are normal. So then we cannot take it easily because investigations are expected to be normal in the initial days. So in the initial period of infections, inflammatory markers and most of the findings will be normal. So we should not get misled by these normal reports. So we have to correlate to the day of illness. Okay. Then knowledge and type of presentation is important because there are 2 types of presentation that we will discuss later. So elicit the history taking is very much important. So elicit the history properly, understand the presentation and day of illness. So coming to natural course of illness. There are 4 stages in the natural course of illness. In any untreated COVID patient, there are 4 stages. Stage 1 is stage of viral replication. Stage 2 is immune dysregulation. Stage 3 is stage of recovery. Stage 4 is post-COVID sequelae. Coming to stage 1, stage of viral replication. This is the early stage of illness. And active viral replication usually takes place at this stage. This stage of viral replication includes both pre-symptomatic, that is incubation period, and manifestation period. That is, it includes both symptomatic, pre-symptomatic, and symptomatic period. So this period is highly infectious. In fact, the period from 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms to 7 days after the onset of symptom is the highly infectious period. So even after that, if RT-PCR shows RT-PCR shows positivity, the infectivity may not be there. So infectivity is peaking usually in the first week of illness. So what are the symptoms in the stages of viral replication? Usually many patients will be having a cold-like symptoms like stuffiness of nose, sore throat, anosmia, and other symptoms of URI. Fever will be there in some cases. Of course, fever is the predominant symptom in some set of people that we'll discuss later. Breathlessness usually do not develop at this stage. You understand all these stages so that you can devise a management plan later. So investigation. CT chest is an absolute necessity in the initial period. But maybe for confirmation and to know the severity, we can take a CT. CT may show a ground glass opacity and CT severity scoring will be less only. Usually it will be less than 7. It will be in the mild category only in the stage of viral replication. Inflammatory markers like CRP, ferritin, D-dimer and IL-6 will be normal at this stage. Naturally, oxygen saturation will also be normal. So don't think that patient is all right at this stage because investigations are normal. So this is the period where if you want to give any antiviral drugs or plasma therapy, you consider all these drugs at this stage because antiviral drugs are effective in preventing the viral neutralizing the viral multiplication. So antiviral drugs should be started early at this stage. This solidarity trial and all done for remdesivir usually done for patients at late stage. That's why solidarity trial did not show beneficial effect on remdesivir. So if you want to, like herpes, if you want to, in herpes and all, we start antiviral in the first 24 to 48 hours. Similarly, for COVID also, you have to start antiviral drugs in the initial viral multiplication stage. Like that, plasma therapy also. Plasma contains antibodies. Antibodies neutralize with the antigen only. So plasma should be given, if you want to give plasma, it should be given at the early stage of illness. What we practiced initially is, we gave plasma at the late stage, mainly for patients severe disease who were on ventilator only, we gave plasma. So naturally, it turned out to be not useful, plasma therapy. So any antiviral drugs or plasma therapy should be started early at the course of illness. Please avoid starting steroids at this stage, as it may promote viral replication, delay the clearance of virus. Though it is said as theoretical, it has the problem of promoting viral replication, delaying the clearance. So if the immunity is good, many people do not develop further illness. But in susceptible people, disease progresses from the viral replication stage to the next stage of immune dysregulation. So at this viral replication stage, most people will request for home quarantine at this stage, as symptoms are mild and blood tests are normal at this stage. Do not take a hasty decision in favor of home quarantine at this stage because investigations are normal. Even in susceptible people, investigations will be normal only. So at least avoid home quarantine for old age patients and in those people with the comorbidities and those who are more prone to develop disease progression. Now coming to stage 2 of immune dysregulation. This immune dysregulation again consists of 3 phases. One is asymptomatic transition phase, hypoxic phase, ARDS and death in untreated cases. So this is the stage. First, patient develops viral replication, then develops stage of immune dysregulation. In dysregulation, usually initial period is the transition phase. After that, patient will develop symptoms of hypoxia. Then cytokine storm cytokine storm will develop and patient will develop ARDS and death. So we'll discuss on transition phase. Few points about the transition phase. This is the very important phase. Actually, this is the most crucial period to be watched out carefully. This is an asymptomatic period, hence is mostly neglected. So clinically, this stage usually starts only 2 to 3 days after the remission of fever. This stage is manifested by no symptoms and only generalized weakness. So after the viral replication, in susceptible people, disease progression develops. So after the remission of fever, there will be 3 days of asymptomatic period. In this period, patient will be having no symptoms or they will have only mild generalized weakness. This phase is important because inflammatory markers start rising at this stage. Even if the symptoms are normal, we can find out who are all more prone to develop severe disease by doing inflammatory markers. If you do 6-minute walk test, if the patient is not having hypoxia, in transition phase, there won't be hypoxia. If you ask the patient to go for 6-minute walk test, patient will desaturate. So in this transition phase, inflammatory markers will start rising. There will be occult hypoxia. These patients are more likely to develop further disease progression. So do the relevant investigation and find out who are all more likely to develop disease progression. Start them with steroids. Starting steroids prevents further progression of the disease. So treatment will be only successful if you start appropriate treatment at this stage. Treatment is less likely to be successful once frank hypoxia develops. So this is an important phase and neglected phase as well. So we have to give importance to this phase and do the relevant investigation and act accordingly. So now again, coming back to symptomatic stage. In the symptomatic stage, transition phase is over. Then symptomatic stage. So fever, URI signs are already got over. Now coming to transition phase. After that, again symptoms. These are all the symptoms. These are all severe symptoms. Patient starts developing breathing difficulty. Initially, breathing difficulty will be on exertion. After that, frank hypoxia will be there. Hypoxia will be disproportionately severe to the degree of clinical symptoms. This is called silent hypoxia. In untreated cases, cytokine storm, diffuse pulmonary microvascular thrombosis and ARDS develops. Disease progression continues in many patients in spite of treatment if they present later, and death ensues. So even if you treat the patient at the late stage, even if the patient survives, many patients survive with the residual pulmonary fibrosis and many complications. So if you want to treat the patient successfully and completely, identify the transition phase, start the drugs appropriately. So this stage, so patient should be monitored carefully and aggressively. They should be treated aggressively. All the anti-inflammatory drugs and immunomodulator should be started early at the course of this stage for maximum benefit. What happened even during this tocilizumab usage, we started tocilizumab at late stage. After the development of ARDS only, we started tocilizumab. That's why we found tocilizumab was not found to be not useful. But in many cases of early ARDS, tocilizumab was found to be useful. Now, of course, it is obsolete. There is no necessity for tocilizumab. If you start steroids, low molecular weight heparin and appropriate drugs at the early in the course of illness, any patient can be saved without any costly treatment. So coming back to this symptomatic stage of immune dysregulation. This stage lasts around 1 week for youngsters, and it can last up to 3 weeks in old age people. Then coming to stage 3 of recovery phase. In the recovery phase, these are all natural course of untreated cases. So in the natural course of infection, recovery phase also starts. It is the third stage. So how will you identify this stage? So patient will start feeling a sense of well-being, though they are still hypoxic and still inflammatory markers are high. They will be, of course, they will be having breathlessness, but they will feel better than the previous day. Hypoxia will be still there, but oxygen saturation will be better than the previous day. Inflammatory markers are still high, but it will start coming down. It will start fall down from the previous values. So at this stage, just maintain the support and just maintain the support at this stage. Don't do any aggressive treatment at this stage. Don't start any new costly drugs at this stage. Just maintain the support. Patient will be all right as he has already come into the recovery phase. This recovery stage lasts for 1 week in youngsters, but it may slow and agonizing in old age people. Those who survive the full-blown ARDS, the recovery will be agonizingly slow in old age people, and it may take up to 4 to 6 weeks for resolution. These people are called long haulers by some, and it usually happens in old age people. Actually, many people will be ventilator dependent or oxygen dependent at this stage. So the treatment cost also will be very high for these long haulers. So most of the time recovery is incomplete and resulting in residual pulmonary fibrosis. To avoid all this, again I am stressing, find out the transition phase, start drugs early. Okay. Now coming to post-COVID sequelae. This stage is manifested by fatigue and exertional dyspnea due to residual pulmonary fibrosis. Those who suffered major thromboembolic episodes can have residual effects. But this pulmonary fibrosis, one interesting point about pulmonary fibrosis, on contrary to common belief, most of the symptoms of most of the pulmonary fibrosis are luckily transient. They are not progressive one. Unlike the pulmonary fibrosis in COPD and ILD, where it usually used to progress. But pulmonary fibrosis secondary to COVID usually improves over a period of many months. Now coming to presentation. There are two types of presentation. One type is predominantly URI type. The other one is only predominantly fever type. This is very important. This type of presentation is very important. Many youngsters, they develop signs of URI like stuffy nose, throat discomfort, and other symptoms of URI, and some people even may develop anosmia. These are all predominantly seen in youngsters. This is not seen after the age of 50 years. This URI type of presentation is usually seen in youngsters only. Whereas in old age people, maybe after the age of 40 with obesity and comorbidity, or after the age of 50 in all patients, symptoms of URI is mostly not seen. They present with the only symptom of fever. So as I have discussed in youngsters who are below the age of 40 years, only cold-like symptoms develops. Usually the symptoms last for 3 to 5 days only. Fever may be there. If at all present, it will be there for 1 or 2 days only. Whereas in old age people, disease is manifested by the only symptom of fever. No symptoms of fever, URI will be there. But this patient, fever will be there for, it can present from 2 days to 2 weeks. I have seen a patient with 3 weeks of fever. Normally, the patients with the URI like symptoms usually less likely to develop disease progression. Patients presenting with the fever are the one who are more likely to develop disease progression. We'll discuss this point later. So now coming to categorization. So for the purpose of management, now we can divide the patients into 2 categories, category 1 and category 2, on the basis of disease behavior and similar presentation. So disease behaves similarly in some age group and for some people. So based on the similar behavior and presentation, for management purpose, we divide the patient into 2 categories. Category 1. So category 1 people are young patient who are non-obese, who are below the age of 40 years and do not have the comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, CKD, CAD. Whereas category 2 patient comprises obese patient irrespective of the age. Even a 20-year-old patient with obesity comes under category 2. So obesity category 2 patient comprises obese patients, all the patients above the age of 45 or 50, and all the patients who have comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, CKD and CAD. Now coming to management of category 1 patients. Few points about disease behavior in category 1 patient. This we have already discussed. Anyway, we will refresh. So in category 1 patients are young patients. They present with URI-like symptoms. Fever may be there for 1 or 2 days only. There may be occasional cough. Previously, we have seen many patients with severe cough. Nowadays, we don't see many patients presenting with a cough. So this category 1 patient generally develop only mild disease. They do not develop disease progression. Only very few people are prone to develop disease progression. Well, that will see later. Yes, CT chest may be taken to assess the severity. CT is more likely to show only a mild discrete lesion, mild lesion only. Usually CT severity score will be less than 5 only in this age group of in category 1 patients. Actually, CT is not an absolute necessity in these patients. If you suspect the patient is more prone to develop disease progression, then do a CT. Do a baseline CBC, CRP, ECG, RFT, etc. So at this stage, in these patients, all the investigation, they are less likely to develop disease progression. So all the investigation will be likely to be normal. So start them on tablet azithromycin 500 mg OD. Give them some nasal decongestants. Continue them for 5 days. Most of the symptoms resolve with 3 to 4 days. As I have said earlier, in some patients who are genetic susceptibility to progress, we cannot keep quiet by seeing all these results. So please do all the tests again, complete blood count, inflammatory markers, CRP, serum ferritin, D-dimer on the 4th day of illness. All these tests will be normal only on 4th day in category 1 patients. So for final maximum safety, finally repeat blood inflammatory markers assay after 2 days. So repeat CRP, ferritin, D-dimer after 2 days. If found normal and patient remaining asymptomatic for 5 days from the last day of illness. So patients are normal. Already we have done two times. Blood tests are repeated. Patient remaining asymptomatic for 5 days from the last day of symptom. then we can be assured that they are unlikely to develop further disease progression. They may be observed under home isolation for 1 week. So now we are discussing about category 1 patient. They are less likely to develop disease progression. Do the relevant investigation, baseline investigation, repeat inflammatory markers on the 4th day. Inflammatory markers will be normal only. Still we cannot keep quiet. Repeat investigation after 2 days. Again, it will be normal only. If the patient is symptom free for 5 days from the last day of illness, we can be assured that they are less likely to progress further. So they may be kept under home isolation. Suppose even in this category 1 patient, fever persists for more than 3 days, or inflammatory markers elevated at any stage, admit them, as they are more likely to develop disease progression. Start them on drugs like injection remdesivir, methylprednisolone, low molecular weight heparin, oxygen, as described below for the category 2 patients. So now coming to management of category 2 patients. So few points about the disease behavior. Category 2 patients are old age patients, obese patients. They have comorbidity. They are more prone to develop disease progression. So these patient presentation is also different. They present with a complaint of only fever. They don't develop symptoms of URI. In fact, URI symptoms of a patient with URI and anosmia, general dictum is they are less likely to develop disease progression. Of course, if they have other comorbidities and obese, still we have to watch them carefully. So category 2 patients present with the only symptom of fever, they don't have usually URI. If they develop a cough, usually it starts on the 4th day of illness only. The problem with the fever is it is a low grade fever and it usually does not go beyond 101 degree. It is an intermittent fever. In fact, if the fever goes above 101, 102, we have to rethink the diagnosis. So the fever is mild only, intermittent fever only. Many people will not be knowing that they are having fever. So they used to neglect the fever. This is the reason for seeking treatment late for young, old age people. So even in this category, most of the time duration of fever, most of the time fever is, even in this category, fever is most of the time it is less than 3 days only. Even this category patients usually some patients will not develop disease progression. Most of the people will develop into severe disease. Yeah, that's what we discussed. Many people with a fever of less than 3 days duration do not develop disease progression, but those who are susceptible will develop disease progression. In susceptible people, complications like breathing difficulty and hypoxia usually develop 2 to 3 days after the last episode of fever, irrespective of the duration of fever. Suppose the patient is having fever for 4 days, if he is susceptible to develop disease progression, he will be asymptomatic for the next 3 days. This is the period of transition that we have already discussed. Suppose if the patient is having 10 days of fever, this transition phase or complications develop after the remission of fever only. That is 10 days, 12th or 13th day only they will develop complications. So whatever be the duration of fever, complications arise after 2 days of remission, 2 to 3 days of remission of fever. So you should be little careful. Fever subsided, we can be relaxed. Not like that. Many patients with the fever, they are more likely to progress. They progress mainly after the 2 to 3 days of transition phase. So now coming to approach. So approach to management in category 2 patients. So by the time patient comes to the hospital, many of us will be having a RT-PCR report and CT chest. CT chest will show they are likely to show a COVID pneumonia, and the symptoms will be in most of the patients will be more than mild symptoms. If CT is not taken, take a CT for all patients who present with fever of more than 3 days duration. So it is important to take CT in category 2 patients. If the fever is persisting for more than 3 days, take CT for all patients. Ascertain the day of illness. It is very much important for deciding the management. Suppose if the patient come within 3 days of illness, check baseline CBC and CRP. Category 2 patient more likely to develop disease progression. They are coming within 3 days of illness. Check CBC and CRP. So at this early stage of viral replication, CRP is unlikely to have started rising. So start them on tablet azithromycin 500 mg OD. If CT shows bilateral opacity or high score, then straight away start them on higher parenteral antibiotic like ceftriaxone 1 gram IV BD. Category 2 patients are more likely to develop disease progression, so we cannot take a chance. Start antiviral drugs for all the patients if they present with more than 3 days of fever. So injection remdesivir is found to be very much effective if started early in the course of illness. The dose of remdesivir is 200 mg on day 1, followed by 100 mg OD for next 4 days. So what will you do if the patient comes 3 days after the onset of symptoms? Again do CBC, glucose, RFT, LFT, ECG and inflammatory markers like CRP, ferritin, D-dimer. Now this patient is coming after 3 days of symptoms, onset of symptoms. So you are doing investigation on the fourth day. Mostly inflammatory markers again will be normal at this stage. They would not have developed breathlessness or hypoxia. This patient continue antibiotics, continue remdesivir and other support medicine and carefully observe. So inflammatory markers are normal for this patient, but they are at risk of developing disease progression. You already started them on remdesivir. Now repeat estimation of blood. So we have to decide on starting steroids and low molecular weight heparin. So repeat investigation of blood inflammatory markers after 2 days. For many patients, inflammatory markers start rising after 5 days. If inflammatory markers are raised, even if the patient is asymptomatic, start them on methylprednisolone 60 mg IVBD. In fact, one Australian study has found that if CRP is more than 20, steroid is very much found to be useful. And if inflammatory markers are raised, start the patient on methylprednisolone 60 mg IVBD. D-dimer is normal, then give enoxaparin 40 mg OD. If D-dimer is high, start the patient on therapeutic dose of enoxaparin, like enoxaparin, low molecular weight heparin, like enoxaparin 40 mg BID. Of course, give other supportive treatment. So what will you do if the fever is persisting beyond 3 days, but still inflammatory markers are normal? I already told, start them on injection remdesivir. But for those people who are having persistent fever of more than 1 week, even if the inflammatory markers are normal, the second week of fever should be taken as in phase of immune dysregulation, and they should be started on steroids and low molecular weight heparin along with remdesivir. So fever persisting more than 1 week, second day you are doing repeating investigation, all the investigation inflammatory markers are normal, still start them on steroids and low molecular weight heparin, since the second week of fever can be taken as stage of immune dysregulation. What happens if the patient is presenting with breathing difficulty and hypoxia? Then immediately start them on oxygen. start them all other drugs like antibiotics, remdesivir. Of course, remdesivir will be less useful at this stage. Still, we can start remdesivir. So start them on antibiotics, higher antibiotics, remdesivir, injection methylprednisolone, and low molecular weight heparin. Put the patient on prone ventilation. Prone ventilation is very much helpful in improve the saturation. Escalate the dose of oxygen therapy. First, you give oxygen through face mask. If the patient has not reached adequate saturation, then put the patient on high flow nasal oxygen therapy. The recent advent of high flow nasal oxygen has revolutionized the treatment of COVID. In fact, it has reduced 50% of, I can say, it has reduced 50% of mortality in those who were who were to be started on ventilators. This HNO is HF, high flow nasal oxygen, is really doing wonders. If the patient is still symptomatic, oxygen saturation is not normal, then start them on CPAP. Patient still dehydrating, then patient may be put on mechanical ventilators. In any patient with ARDS, mechanical ventilators, any patients with ARDS with mechanical ventilators, you can reduce mortality by 50%, at least 50%. But in COVID-induced ARDS, mechanical ventilators therapy is less likely to be helpful. In fact, it is doing more harm in many patients. But still, if for discerning cases, we have to give mechanical ventilatory therapy. Then, of course, give other supportive therapy like insulin. Many patients with the diabetics or pre-diabetics develop high blood sugar because of these steroids. So give them insulin. Continue many patients will be having comorbidity like cardiac, CAD and CKD. Start them, continue their regular drugs. So how long should we treat the patient? So what is the duration of treatment? Remdesivir may be stopped in 5 days. Continue methylprednisolone for 5 days in the same dose. Then reduce the dose and stop if they recover fully. Steroids may be continued in low dose till discharge or even continued at home for many weeks in case the patient develops ARDS and extensive residual pulmonary fibrosis. Enoxaparin can be continued in same dose till D-dimer value returns to normal. Then continued in OD dosage till the patient gets discharged. Oxygen therapy can be continued till the patient completely recovers. Some patients who recover from ARDS may require home oxygen therapy for a few weeks because of the residual pulmonary fibrosis. Anticoagulants, oral anticoagulants, antiplatelets, in my opinion, are not necessary. They need not be prescribed routinely on discharge unless the patient develops a major thrombotic event during treatment. This prothrombotic stage, usually, like inflammatory markers and symptoms, it also peaks in the stage of immune dysregulation. Once the sepsis resolves, prothrombotic state also resolves. So I feel that there is no need for routine administration of antiplatelets and oral anticoagulants on discharge. So now coming to the end. So what are the take-home message? COVID manifestation is a spectrum. So understand the natural course of infection, identify the type of presentation, categorize the patient according to the age and type of presentation, find out the susceptible people who are more likely to develop disease progression with the help of age, clinical examination and investigation. Start appropriate drugs at appropriate time. Treat the patient successfully. Thank you. I thank I thank all the office bearers, president, secretary, esteemed members for giving me, members of IMA Villivakam for giving me this opportunity. I especially thank Jayaraman sir for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Jayaraman sir. Thank you, friends.
Wonderful, awesome presentation, Dr. Vasant Kumar. You are a real, very good teacher. So teaching the COVID update very nicely. The way you are giving this lecture is so wonderful, awesome. So you have divided the stages, disease manifestations to 4 stages. Very nice classification, and the treatment category wise, category 1 and category 2, and very nicely you elaborated all the drugs. The timely medication and timely appropriate medication, proper dosages are very essential, and the timely intervention is mandatory. We have to meticulously see the biomarkers of this ferritin and CRP is very helpful, and when to start the injection, steroids, and when to start the injection remdesivir and all. Very good presentation. Go to the question and answer sessions. I'll see the Q&A box now. Yeah. There is a question from Dr. Sundaramurthy sir. Is it ideal to give vaccination during COVID pandemic with second wave? Vasant?
Sir, in fact, all the patients should be vaccinated.
Yeah.
Herd immunity acquired through vaccination is the one which is going to eliminate the pandemic.
Fine.
All the patients should be vaccinated unless there is a contraindication, specific contraindication.
Okay, very good. Another question again from Dr. Sundaramurthy sir. Blood groups in COVID-19 severity. Is there any relationship between the blood group and the COVID severity?
There are some reports of severe disease in some blood groups, but more studies are required to finalize the recommendations, sir.
Okay. Another question from
At this
Dr.
stage, we are not
Mahendra.
able to
Yeah.
give any recommendations, sir.
Okay. Another question to my mobile WhatsApp. As of now, we are seeing more cases of cold with the body pain, with a mild cough, almost with a no detectable temperature. My question is, can you give 1 or 2 symptoms that can rule out or rule in COVID? If the patient comes with taking paracetamol alone, can it mask temperature in COVID? If running nose present, can we rule out COVID systematically? And auscultatory finding is not NAD. Can you throw some lights on it here? That is
In a pandemic time, any patient presenting with the fever or URI should be suspected of COVID and do the relevant investigation accordingly. Nowadays, we are in the middle of second wave of COVID. Daily, I am seeing more than 5 to 7 cases of COVID in my OPD. Most of the patients who present with the symptoms of URI ultimately turned out to be COVID only.
Oh, okay, fine.
So during this pandemic, any patient with the URI and fever or fever, maybe in youngsters, maybe if they are not willing, they can be kept under a home isolation. They are less likely to develop disease progression. One need not bother much. If any elder family members are there at home, we have to explain to the patient, convince them for the further investigation, establish the diagnosis, isolate him, and treat the elders in their home, in their family. So in a pandemic time, even 1 day fever, even 1 day cough and cold should be suspected for COVID and appropriately evaluated, sir.
Thank you. One more from Dr. Sundarlingam, sir. Good presentation, Vasant Kumar. Any use of prescribing pirfenidone for post-COVID fibrosis? Actually,
Pirfenidone is very good, very useful for patients with the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis.
Yes.
There is no controlled studies available for its use in post-COVID sequelae, but as it is a harmless, there is no serious side effects. We can, considering the disability of post-COVID sequelae, we can very well start them on pirfenidone in a therapeutic dose. And it has to be continued at least for 3 months to get the beneficial results. Many patients are finding it useful. He can be prescribed pirfenidone, sir.
Oh, sir, fine. Another question from Dr. Geeta Chandrasekharan. can pregnant and lactating mothers take vaccine?
There is actually there is no absolute contraindication. In fact, ACO, American College of Obstetricians, they recommend vaccinating their antenatal mothers.
Okay.
So Covaxin, being a killed vaccine, can be given in pregnant and lactating mothers if they are at high risk. I cannot give any recommendation on my own because it's a national program. But from my side, because it is a killed vaccine, even if they take this vaccine, they are unlikely to develop any serious complications.
Okay, fine. Another question from
It is
Dr.
going to be
Yeah.
beneficial only.
Fine, very good. Another question from Dr. Usha Nagadevi. What is the percentage of patients requiring LTOT, long-term oxygen therapy in your practice, sir? And role of nintedanib in post-COVID?
Role of, sorry?
Role of nintedanib, antifibrotic agents.
Okay. Only very few people require home oxygen therapy. Maybe I can say less than 1% will be required. Maybe if you take the ICU cases, maybe 10 to 20% of ICU cases may require home oxygen therapy.
Okay.
And in these people, steroids may be continued. Antifibrotic agents, pirfenidine and nintedanib is there. But in some studies, nintedanib is found to be more effective than pirfenidine. So we can try, and the number of tablets also less with nintedanib. So we can give a try with nintedanib.
Thank you, sir. Then one more question. Can symptoms come after vaccine?
Symptoms of what, sir? I didn't get you.
Yeah, COVID symptom. There is infection. Again, suppose I take 2 vaccines, my body, antibody is there. Can I get again infection?
Vaccine-induced disease is uncommon, unlikely. Suppose if the patient is in the incubation period when they take vaccine, they can very well develop a infection. Even in those patients, usually symptoms will be mild only.
Okay.
Because vaccine is a killed vaccine and Covishield is a adenovirus vector-based vaccine. They are unlikely to produce vaccine-induced infections. But they can develop an infection if they were in incubation period when they were taking the vaccine.
Okay, fine. One example. Suppose our colleague had 2 vaccinations.
Yes.
The 2 weeks, there is 4 weeks apart. 2 vaccines over and 2 weeks over. Suppose, what is the chance of developing again the infection, the COVID?
So far the studies, Covishield shows 70% efficacy only. That means even after 2 doses of vaccine, remaining 30% people are at risk of developing infection, and they have developed infection as well. But the good news is that the infection is mild. That is mild enough that they don't usually require hospitalization, or even they don't develop death. That is the one advantage. So the Covishield effective claimed is only 70%. The remaining 30% people are at risk of developing infection, but the infection will be usually mild, and usually they may not require hospitalization, or they may not develop death. It will be mild only.
Vasan, do you find any mode of presentation in first wave and the second wave?
Yeah, slightly there is a difference. In the initial period of pandemic last year, many patients initially they presented with a severe incessant cough, 2 to 3 days of cough. After that, suddenly developed breathing issues. In 4 or 5 days, within 1 week, most of the patient died, even youngsters. As time goes, this cough became very, very less. Presentation of cough became very, very less. The long haulers type of presentation became predominant. I have discussed about long haulers, people presenting with only fever. Fever will be there for many months, many weeks. They develop symptoms slowly and recover slowly. So these were the predominant findings in the later part of the pandemic. Now what we see is many patients present with very mild symptoms only. Most of the URI, I presume that most of the URI present at the community level at present is should be COVID only. So the changing pattern, it is already only 2 weeks got over. We cannot predict at this stage. Still, I am seeing so much of very, very mild cases. Usually, even in old age, usually they don't progress. Same time, yesterday I saw one patient, 21-year-old female, no comorbidity, thin patient, developed bilateral opacity and hypoxia. So only it is 2 weeks got over. We cannot predict at this stage. But in my opinion, transmissibility is high, disease severity is less, I feel. This is what I feel at this new pandemic, new wave, second wave.
Okay. Thank you. What is the role of oral antiviral agent like favipiravir? Do you use favipiravir? Any?
I don't use, in my opinion, it is useless.
Okay. Any other drug, chloroquine and the ivermectin?
The $1 million question.
Okay. Doxycycline.
Nobody knows really. But
Okay.
what we have seen is even without chloroquine and ivermectin, we can treat any patients with the available drugs.
What's the role of azithromycin? Azithromycin in the early stage of
That also we don't know.
any antiviral effect of azithromycin?
It is claimed to have antiviral effect,
Okay.
but we start azithromycin for the URI type of patients only. URI type of patients, even without any treatment, most of the patient improves well. They don't develop disease progression.
Role of nebulized bronchodilator.
I feel there is no role for nebulized bronchodilators in COVID because bronchodilator, as the name itself shows, that is a bronchodilator dilates the bronchi. Whereas
Yeah.
COVID, the problem is mainly in the interstitium, not in the bronchi. Main pathology is there in the interstitium.
Correct.
So bronchodilators have no role in interstitial pathology.
Right. Another question. How long is the vaccine effective, sir?
We don't know, sir. It's a new pandemic. Vaccine is also new to us. Maybe, in my opinion, maybe it should give protection at least for 1 year. Maybe we have to wait and see.
Okay.
Okay. But I feel it is very much effective. Even for those patients who received a vaccine for MERS and SARS, protective antibodies are seen even after many years. Same thing should apply in SARS-CoV-2 also. So it should be a long-lasting one. Even if the antibodies wane, there should be memory T cells which should take care of further infections.
Okay, thank you. What, in your opinion, Vasan, the second wave, how long it will be, be there in our, India or in Chennai and all? What is your opinion? Any, when will it peak and all? Any idea about second wave?
Yeah, it may peak. I feel it may peak in April and May. But it may be short-lived, I feel, because this second wave is due to waning of immunity for some people who have acquired infection in the first phase. And it may be due to mutant virus. So suppose if patient had attained herd immunity, maybe last time 50% we had attained herd immunity. Over a period of time, say 10 to 20% people might have lost the antibody response. Mucous, those who did not develop severe infection, their antibody response was very, very less only. Usually mucosal infection do not give long-lasting immunity. Mucosal infection means URI type of infection do not give long-lasting immunity. So the ideal one is vaccine-induced herd immunity is the one which will eliminate the disease. But we have to maximize the rate of vaccination. There are hesitation among the doctor community and public community. So it is an unwarranted one. At the rate of present vaccination, it is very difficult to attain herd immunity through vaccination also. So far, vaccine was launched in January 16th. So far, we have vaccinated only 5 crores people. That means every month we are vaccinating 2 crore people. Indian population is more than 130 crore. For herd immunity, we need at least 40 to 50% people should get vaccinated or infected. Suppose we take 30% people for vaccination and 30% from wild infection, 60% will develop herd immunity. So to vaccinate these 30% people, it will take at least 15 to 24 months to vaccinate all these people if we do vaccination at this present rate. So we have to increase the rate of vaccination, and we have to allay the fears in the public mind. We have to increase the rate of vaccination. That is the point. Maybe if we increase the rate of vaccination, maybe it should be a short-lived one. Maybe in another 2 to 3 months, it should subside.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vasant. Any other question from our audience?
Sir, Vasant sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, regarding the second dose of vaccination, which one you prefer, on 29th day or after 6 weeks?
For Covishield, I prefer maybe after 8 weeks.
Okay.
For Covishield, it's better to take after a gap of 8 weeks. And Covaxin, there is no recommendation, no such recommendation. So you can take after 4 weeks. Maybe anytime after 4 weeks should be okay.
For Covaxin, sir.
For Covaxin.
But already have taken Covishield.
Sorry, ma'am.
Covishield have taken on 29th day. It's okay, sir.
Second dose, ma'am.
Yeah.
Don't worry, still it will give protective immunity. Suppose even if you contract an infection, for discussion sake, you will develop only mild infection, don't worry, but chances are only 10 to 20% only. Now it is claimed that even Covishield is efficacy is around 80%, even for Covishield.
Sir, being a killed vaccine, is Covaxin is better for the old age people after 65 or 70, or what you feel?
I feel that for all age group, Covaxin should be ideal one.
Ideal one, okay.
At the same time, we need not talk ill about Covishield.
Okay, definitely. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good presentation, Vasant. On behalf of IMA Chennai Vilivakam, I thank Vasant Kumar for this wonderful presentation. There is a token of appreciation. There is a memento. Tomorrow I'll hand over in person. So
Okay,
usually
sir.
we have in-person meeting. Directly we hand over all and other thing and all. So tomorrow I'll hand over to you. So thank you very much. It's a wonderful presentation. Awesome discussions. We learned a lot of things from Professor Vasant Kumar. Very nice. Thank you very much, Vasant. So thank you all. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Very good and informative CME, sir. Today we had. Sorry, sir. One more question regarding virulence and case fatality rate. About that's your opinion about that. Case virulence.
Generally,
After your experience this during this second pandemic.
second pattern seems to be transmissibility is more.
Okay.
Virulence seems to be less only,
Yes, sir.
but we have to wait and watch.
Yes, sir. So
Already
as sir said, okay, sir.
We have to wait and see.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. As sir said, carry home message will be mainly vaccination is an
Yes,
protective.
vaccination is there.
Herd
We
immunity.
have to
Yeah.
recommend
Thank you,
vaccine for all people
Mm.
unless there is a contraindication, specific
Okay.
contraindication.
Specific contraindication. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. On behalf of IMA, we really thank you. We had a very wonderful and informative sessions today, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, thank you, madam.
Thank you, Vasant. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for the
Okay, sir.
listening. Thank you.
Next presentation will be Dr. S. Jayaraman, sir, our dynamic president, senior consultant from MGM Healthcare, Bilroth and First Med Apollo, and Sri Jayam Chest Clinic. Over to Dr. Jayaraman, sir. Topic of interest, World Sleep Day. I welcome, sir. Dr. Jayaraman, sir, please.
Thank you, madam. Soumya ma'am, I want to share my presentation. Request Vasant to this thing. Stop share. No, you have to stop sharing screen, Vasant. Yeah. Oh, fine. Is my slide visible to everyone?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So, good afternoon to one and all. So, thank you very much. We had a wonderful, nice discussion on COVID-19, approach to the management of COVID-19 from Professor Dr. Vasant Kumar. So, nicely, we all learned so many points. So, now, in this month, we are a lot of healthy days, International Women's Day, World Tuberculosis Day, and World Sleep Day. So my important subject is intervention plus sleep apnea, that is sleep disorder breathing. Today I'll be presenting briefly about the World Sleep Day commemoration to talk on snoring and sleep apnea. So World Sleep Day, you all know, every year we have a theme. There is a mantra or slogan. This year's slogan is the regular sleep, healthy future. This is the theme for this year. Yeah, World Sleep Day is an annual event that calls to action important issues related to sleep using a collaborative efforts energized by sleep professionals all over the world. The focus of World Sleep Day is to bring cognitions to the many burden of sleep problems. World Sleep Society, World Sleep Day publicly displays efforts being taken towards prevention and management of sleep disorders. Because a lot of sleep disorders are preventable and treatable and curable. The World Sleep Day slogan or mantra or the is the regular sleep, healthy future. The focus on regular sleep for 2021 is based on the benefits that regular sleep offers. Studies have demonstrated that stable bedtimes and rise times, that is, this is a sleep schedule associated with a better quality in young, middle-aged adults and seniors. Regular sleepers have better mood, psychomotor performance, and academic achievement. How can we have a regular sleep? We need to remember that two processes that regulate timing and length of sleep. Circadian regulation, process C, and homeostatic control, process S, also known as the two-process model of sleep. Although many other factors affect sleep, such as environment, stress, and medications. Understanding the two processes will help us strive towards a consistent sleep schedule. This process is particularly important when we take naps in the afternoon because we deplete the sleep-promoting substances and we are not able to fall asleep at a reasonable time in the evening. The best sleep is when we synchronize our sleep-wake times to our internal clock, and our sleep propensity findings the perfect equilibrium between the process C and the process S. What are the sleep functions? It is important to remember that sleep is involved with many physiologic systems such as memory consolidation, control inflammation. Sleep is an anti-inflammatory act, hormone regulation. During sleep only, we have a lot of hormone secretions like growth hormone, other neutralizing hormone like cortisol and all, and the cardiovascular regulation and many other important functions from the sleep. Coming to the subject proper, snoring. So you all know the main symptom of obstructive sleep apnea is snoring. But in the layman terminology, if you ask anybody snoring in a sleep, they said it's a good sleep. But we as a medical profession know snoring is a abnormal one. Snoring is an abnormal respiratory sound during sleep due to turbulence of airflow in a narrowed airway, vibrations from the upper airway wall causing snoring. There are two types of snoring. One is a simple snoring. It will be there for a few days, 2 to 3 days cold due to the cold or allergy or infections, etc. But in a sleep apnea snoring, patient will have a habitual snorer, breathing passages narrows while sleeping, and it produces complete blockage of the upper airway. This is a sleep apnea snoring. Simple snoring usually present 2 to 3 days time. It's a self-limiting. It will settle within 2 to 3 days. May require anti-cold medications in the form of anti-allergic tablets, cetirizine and all. And nasal spray and drops will help in relieving the symptoms immediately. Rarely, minor surgery like correction of defect nasal septum and septoplasty and all necessary for the simple snoring. Coming to the sleep disorder, there are 7 major categories of sleep disorder as per the International Classification of the Sleep Disorders. One is the insomnia. This is insomnia is a very common among the sleep disorders. Next to that is a sleep-related breathing disorders, central disorders of hypersomnolence, circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders, parasomnias, mainly that is bruxism, sleep talking, sleepwalking, etc. Sleep-related movement disorders like restless leg syndrome and periodic leg movement syndrome, and other sleep disorders like bruxism, enuresis, etc. Sleep-related breathing disorders, we respiratory physicians see a lot of patients of sleep apnea. This is an abnormal respiration during sleep. The obstructive sleep apnea syndrome is very common, 80 to 85%, and the central sleep apnea caters 10 to 15%, and less than 2% caters the sleep-related hyperventilation disorders and sleep-related hypoxemia disorders. Sleep apnea is another common presentation of the respiratory thing. We see a lot of cases like obstructive sleep apnea, central sleep apnea, mixed apnea, complex sleep apnea, obesity hyperventilation, upper airway resistance syndrome. Epidemiology, 80% affected by in the men population. Prevalence is 2% in women and 4% in men. 2/3 are obese. Risk factors for obstructive sleep apnea, gender, male to female ratio is 2:1. Obesity, more than 120% ideal body weight. Neck size, collar size, more than 17 inches in males and 15 inches in females are the high-risk groups developing these OSA. Sleep disorder breathing is a spectrum of disease characterized by ranging from snoring, upper airway resistance syndrome, and obstructive sleep apnea syndrome, and obesity hyperventilation. Sleep disorder breathing is a very common sleep disorders. One extreme is insomnia, other end is the sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a very common among the sleep disorder breathing. In practical, this is a very much under-recognized, under-diagnosed, and under-treated condition. Obstructive sleep apnea, by definition, recurrent episodes of partial or complete airway obstruction during sleep due to repetitive collapse of the pharynx necessitating recurrent awakenings to re-establish airway patency. There are two main events here. One is hypopnea, that means more than 50% reduction in airflow for more than 10 seconds, or less than 50% reduction in airflow plus 3% oxygen desaturation plus or minus arousal. Apnea means total cessation of airflow for at least 10 seconds. This is the pathophysiological mechanisms and consequences of sleep apnea. There are two main events, apnea, hypopnea, which leads to sleep fragmentation, hypoxemia, and negative intrathoracic pressure. These three leads to sympathetic surge, which release a lot of catecholamines, mainly adrenaline and noradrenaline, and it affects on the hemodynamic effect on the cardiovascular system, oxidative stress, inflammation, endothelial dysfunction, hypercoagulability, endocrine dysfunction. These are all which leads to endocrinopathy, mainly diabetes mellitus and insulin resistance. And all these three pathogenic factors which leads to cardiovascular diseases like hypertension, arrhythmias, coronary artery disease, cerebrovascular accident, congestive heart failure, and pulmonary hypertension. This sleep fragmentation directly leads to sleepiness, which leads to road traffic accident crashes and poor quality of life. And the sleep fragmentation, disturbed sleep, leads to neurocognitive effect because of the hypoxic encephalopathy, which leads to poor cognitive function, poor executive function, and poor quality of life. Factors potentially modulating the clinical phenotype. There are several phenotype of obstructive sleep apnea, like asthma we have several phenotype, and COPD we have several phenotype. Each and every disease have several phenotype and the genetic thing variant. Here there are three traits. One is the hereditary traits regulating upper airway structure, hereditary traits regulating facial structure, and hereditary traits regulating the ventilatory sensitivity. The clinical presentation phenotypes are there are 5 types. One is the REM-related apneas. You all know REM. That is there is a rapid eye movement sleep. There are 2 stages of sleep. One is the rapid eye movement sleep. Other one is the non-rapid eye movement sleep or non-REM sleep. In this category, the clinical presentation is predominantly a REM-related apnea, and the second one is the obesity-related apnea. Third one is the position-dependent apnea, and apnea with a hypersomnolence, complex apneas. There are several factors which affect the clinical presentation, like nutrition and the brain stimulant like coffee, and obesity plays a major role. Exercise, alcohol, air pollution, smoking, work schedule. These are all the factors which affects the clinical phenotypes. OSA is a complex disease, polygenic. Obstructive sleep apnea is a complex disease, so well characterized phenotypes are important. There are 3 main clusters of obstructive sleep apnea presentation. The first group is the disturbed sleep group. Second one is the minimally symptomatic group. Third one is the excessive daytime sleepiness group. There are several presentations of the obstructive sleep apnea. These are all the common clinical conditions we have to suspect. Once you know in terms of sleep apnea should be suspected. Systemic hypertension, very common metabolic syndrome, obesity, myocardial infarction, and cerebrovascular accident. These 2 is the top 2 causes of death in the world. Pulmonary hypertension, type 2 diabetes. So we are all diabetic capital in the world. Nocturnal cardiac arrhythmias. This is one of the potent risk factors for sudden death during sleep. Driver involved in a sleep-related automobile crash. Pre-operative anesthesia evaluation for surgeons and anesthetists is very important. Uncontrolled asthma. One of the comorbid conditions in asthma is the sleep apnea. Cancer. The link between the sleep apnea and cancer because of the independent hypoxia, which leads to the oncogenesis, which leads to cancer, and that is an uncontrolled proliferation of the malignant cells. How to diagnose sleep disorder breathing? History is very important. We have to ask there are several questionnaires. Stop Bank questionnaire, Epworth Sleepiness Scale questionnaire, and Berlin questionnaire, etc. Stop Bank, this is abbreviation of Stop Bank. S stands for snoring, T stands for tiredness, O, have you observed any choking or gasping? P stands for pressure, blood pressure. B stands for the body mass index. A stands for the age. So once age advances, the incidence of sleep apnea is very high. And G is gender, male predominance. And Epworth Sleepiness Scale is a scale which assesses the daytime sleepiness. So we have a score, we have to calculate as per, this is a very simple, easy questionnaire. From the history, we can derive whether the patient has a high risk group to develop the sleep apnea or not. And coming to the examination, mostly 80% of the patient, so they will have obesity and facial abnormalities like retrognathia and micrognathia. BP will be elevated. And in oral cavity examination gives a lot of clue. Mainly in the children, obstructive sleep apnea in children, the tonsillar enlargement is one of the main important findings of sleep apnea in children. This is a very easily treatable by surgical thing. You want coming to the investigation, the sleep study or polysomnography is a gold standard investigation to confirm the diagnosis of sleep disorder breathing. And nowadays we are doing the polygraphy, that is a minimal channel polygraphy. We will utilize the portable sleep study or level 3 sleep study or home sleep test to find out whether the patient has sleep apnea or not. Once you confirm the diagnosis of obstructive sleep apnea, the treatment modality is the multidisciplinary. So we have to send the patient to ENT and surgical colleague for the curative intent. Curative intent in the sense, so we have to cure the diseases, majority of the patients, by subjecting the patient for the ENT evaluation. They will do a sleep MRI or dynamic MRI to assess the level of obstruction. They will do the DICE. DICE means a drug-induced endoscopy to see the level of obstruction, whether the patient has a static block or dynamic block in the upper airway. And in the case of retro and micrognathia, we have to see, we have to do the facial capillary by X-ray or CT scan to find out the degree of facial abnormality for the surgical corrective procedures. And polysomnography, already mentioned, this is the sleep test, which is a gold standard test. This is the, in polysomnography, there are several measurements, several channels, several attachments in the body. That is oral and nasal airflow and respiratory effort to find out whether central apnea or mixed apnea or obstructive apnea. Pulse oximetry to see any desaturation. 2-lead EKG, electrocardiogram to see any arrhythmias. Leg and chin EMG, electromyography to find out any restless leg syndrome associated with the sleep apnea. And EOG, electrooculagram, and 2-lead EEG, electroencephalography to see the sleep stages, whether REM stage disorder or non-REM stage disorder. We can clearly classify what kind of disorder patient is having. From the polysomnography sleep test, we derive the value called a AHI. That means apnea hypopnea index. That is total number of apnea, that is complete obstruction of the upper airway, and hypopnea, partial obstruction of the upper airway, divided by the total sleep times in hours. So from AHI, we divide the severity of sleep apnea into mild, moderate, severe. Mild means AHI of 5 to 15, moderate means 15 to 30, severe means AHI of more than 30 per hour. There are 4 levels of sleep study. Level 1 and level 2, we call it as polysomnography or in-lab polysomnography. And we have level 3 study is a home sleep study, portable study. Level 4 is there is oximetry screening. There are a lot of there is wearable devices we can wear in the wristwatch like, and we have a pulse oximeter. A lot of digital things are available to diagnose. This is a screening tool, level 4 sleep study. Coming to the this is a level 3 polygraphy or sleep study or a portable study. This is a very highly effective to diagnose the obstructive sleep apnea, as per the World Sleep Society and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommending this type of study more than sufficient to diagnose the obstructive sleep apnea. But in the case of any comorbid conditions like severe COPD, severe congestive heart failure patients, or morbid obesity patients, so many metabolic syndromes, where to do the level 2 or level 1 study in the hospital study is ideal recommendation from the World Sleep Society. Otherwise, more than 95%, we do a home sleep study. We send the technicians to the patient home and attach the gadgets like this and the chest recorder, that is a nasal cannula and the finger flow pulse oximeter. We record it. This is a normal sleeping time recording. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. we'll record the thing. Technicians will attach and give the instruction and it will come out, and patient can lie down and sleep normally as usual. In between, patient can go to the restroom and come back. This is the advantage of this home level home sleep study. The cost is very less. patient comfort is more here, and we can diagnose accurately without any hospitalization at all. And this cost is around 6,000 to 8,000 rupees when you compare to polysomnography, video study, and all will cost 35,000 rupees in the hospital settings. This is more than sufficient to diagnose the lesion. This is a level 2 polysomnography. You can see a lot of leads, EEG leads, EMG leads, and a lot of leads here. This is the in-lab polysomnography. This patient is very severe COPD and other metabolic complications like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, dyslipidemia, plus sleep apnea evaluation going on. And in MRI study, any patients come to you with a symptom of sleep disorder breathing, we have to assess the 2 level of obstruction, whether the patient has a static obstruction or dynamic obstruction. If the patient has predominantly static obstruction, by investigations like MRI, dynamic MRI or sleep endoscopy, so patient will more benefit from the surgical surgery. And if the patient has predominant dynamic obstruction, so we'll treat with positive airway pressure or intraoral devices, etc. So this is the treatment modality of this thing. See here, this is the sagittal MRI. You can see very clearly. This is a dynamic MRI. This is the normal airway. You can see the retrolingual and retroglossal areas, retropalatal areas, and you can see the apneic airway. This is very important to assess the level of obstruction, whether retrolingual or retropalatal. From these, surgeon will decide about what kind of surgery, whether is it uvulopalatopharyngoplasty or laser assisted or co-ablation technique to reduction of the upper airway musculature or upper airway excessive tissue and all. Pathogenesis of metabolic abnormalities, sleep apnea, which leads to glucose intolerance and diabetes mellitus because of insulin resistance. There are 2-way mechanisms, hypoxia and arousal, which leads to diabetes, and other mechanistic links between sleep apnea and metabolic dysfunction. The sleep apnea, there are 2 factors, sleep fragmentation and intermittent hypoxia, which leads to sympathetic activation, hypothalamic pituitary axis dysregulation, and systemic inflammation, which leads to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Other mechanism, the intermittent hypoxia, which directly leads to beta cell dysfunction in the pancreas, which affects the diabetes. Once you diagnose the obstructive sleep apnea by doing the polysomnography or polygraphy and dynamic MRI and sleep endoscopy, the treatment is a multidisciplinary approach. So chest physician is a team leader. They have to work up thoroughly. Once you diagnose the sleep apnea, and we have to evaluate by the ENT and head and neck surgeon to see the patient as a curative intent by subjecting for the patient of any upper airway obstruction like dynamic or static obstruction by putting sleep endoscopy. There is nasopharyngoscopy, drug-induced endoscopy, and sleep MRI. And in a case of retrognathia or micrognathia, like any facial abnormality, we have to send the patient for oral and maxillofacial surgeon to see any oral devices or any maxillomandibular advancement devices to improve the upper airway anatomy. And in the case of morbid obesity, as per the definition, morbid obesity, the BMI, body mass index is more than 35, 40, we have to refer the patient for the bariatric surgeon for the bariatric surgery like gastric Roux-en-Y or sleeve gastrectomy, etc. Positive airway pressure therapy. PAP therapy is one of the gold standard treatment of sleep disorder breathing. There are 2 ways of PAP therapy. One is CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. Other one is the bilevel positive airway pressure. The upper airway assessment before PAP therapy by ENT surgeon is very, very important. This is the full face mask. Those who are having an open mouth breathing during sleep, we have to give full face mask. We know by CPAP trial, only a trial we know. This is a nasal mask. There are a lot of masks available. Nasal pillows are available for the patient comfort, and we have a lot of adherent treatments are available for the CPAP. Roll-up surgery in sleep disorder breathing in children suffering from the OSA. The treatment of choice is adenotonsillectomy. Majority they won't require any sleep study, oral cavity examination to see the patient whether the patient has adenoid tonsil and all. And the upper airway, there is adult and adolescents and other major groups of disease age group. Upper airway surgery for mild to moderate disease in young or middle age, the role of surgery is very, very important. We have to see as a patient as a curative intent. And the maxillomandibular advancement osteotomy for retro and micrognathia, bariatric surgery for the morbidly obese guy. This is a classical presentation of children suffering from OSA. You can see large enlargement of the tonsillar enlargement. So this patient is benefited from the adenotonsillectomy. And this is, you can see retrognathia, very classical this thing. This patient, the treatment of choice is maxillary mandibular advancement osteotomy. This will cure the disease completely. Hypoglossal nerve stimulation, this is a pipeline management, still not yet approved. So this is like, this pacemaker stimulation. Should not be done with a BMI of more than 32 and the in patients with a concentric retroparietal collapse in a drug-induced sleep endoscopy. This is all pipeline management. There is a, recently we had a case of stroke, CVA. This is the 63-year-old male, known hypertensive on 2 drug, presented to the emergency room with a slurring of speech and weakness one half of the body. And on clinical examination, there is a mild weakness. CT MRI shows no abnormal diagnosis. Observation neuro ICU, and this patient underwent sleep study 2 years before. I was called to see this patient in view of the overweight and sleep apnea. And we did a repeat sleep test done, which showed a severe obstructive sleep apnea. Patient was evaluated by the ENT surgeon. They said no major anatomical obstruction. He can proceed with CPAP. We advised CPAP. Patient is using daily CPAP therapy. There is no recurrent stroke after that. Patient had initially a transient ischemic attack due to the hypertension and other etiologies. Coming to the principles of good sleep, following guidelines of sleep hygiene can help to prevent a poor quality nocturnal sleep, short duration of sleep, fragmentation of sleep, and serious sleep deprivation in adults. There are 10 commandments of sleep hygiene for adults. These are the recommendations from the American Sleep Academy and the World Sleep Society. Number 1 commandments for sleep hygiene is the sleep schedule. We have to fix a bedtime and an awakening time. Number 2, if you are in the habit of taking siestas, nap, don't exceed 45 minutes of the daytime sleep. If you exceed the 45 minutes, it will affect your night regular sleep. Avoid excessive alcohol ingestion 4 hours before bedtime and do not smoke. 4th recommendation is the avoid caffeine 6 hours before bedtime. This includes coffee, tea, and many sodas as well as chocolate. This is not the brain stimulant. It will affect your sleep. And 5th sleep hygiene recommendation is the avoid heavy, spicy, or sugary foods 4 hours before bedtime. A light snack before bed is acceptable. Exercise regularly, but not right before bed. Use comfortable bedding. It's very important. Find a comfortable temperature setting for sleeping and keep the room well ventilated. 9th recommendation for sleep hygiene is the block out all distracting noise and eliminate as much light as possible. Reserve the bed for sleep and sex. Don't use the bed as an office, workroom, or recreation room. This is all the recommendation of sleep hygiene from the American Sleep Academy. To summarize, sleep disorder breathing is a common disease. Only thing is an under-recognized, under-diagnosed, under-treated condition. That's why we are doing all awareness program, World Sleep Day. To commemorate World Sleep Day, we are doing a lot of CME awareness camp to the public, protection camp to the public, and all the corporate office regarding the importance of sleep. And they're snoring. So our people snoring means they thought it's a very good sleep. So we have to change in our people mind that snoring, there are 2 types of snoring, simple snoring and sleep apnea snoring. Simple snoring will be there for 2 to 3 days time due to cold and upper airway and sinusitis, rhinitis and all. If any person is having regular habitual snoring, we have to rule out sleep apnea, because sleep apnea is one of the syndrome, one of the non-communicable diseases, very common entity syndrome called syndrome Z. There is a diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, obesity. These 4 we call it as metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. Along with obstructive sleep apnea, we call it as syndrome Z. Once you diagnose the obstructive sleep apnea, the treatment is multidisciplinary. You have to involve the chest physician as the team leader, and the ENT surgeon is a very important person to cure the disease, and the oral and maxillofacial surgeon in the case of retro and micrognathia. And in the case of morbid obesity, we have to involve the bariatric surgeon and the other endocrinologists for the hypothyroidism correction and all. So this way we have to treat the obstructive sleep apnea. It's one of the common among the sleep disorders. So with that, I conclude my talk. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Any questions? I'll take your questions now. Thank you. Over to our secretary, Madam.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. We had a very good informative regarding sleep, snoring and sleep apnea, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Madam, please check any questions for myself and Dr. Basanta Kumar.
No, sir. I didn't get.
Q&A box or in the chat box?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
You can proceed.
Yes, sir. Okay. Members, please, any doubts, please, you can call up. If not, we can close the session, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir. Good evening to all. I thank all our respected members for having participated in today's CME. And also I thank today's eminent speakers of the day, Dr. M. Asantha Kumar, Senior Assistant Professor from KMC, for having a good, for briefing about approach to management of COVID. Really, we had a wonderful session, sir. I thank you very much, sir. I thank you on behalf of IMH and Villuvakkam brand, sir. As usual, I thank our dynamic president, the topic of interest, World Sleep Day. And also I thank my special thanks to Dr. Kamalakannan, Joint Secretary of FSS of IMA Tamil Nadu, for giving a brief orientation regarding FSS scheme. As Sir said, we have to enroll ourselves in both FSS 1 and 2. I think we have small members had joined. Please motivate others to join also. And my special appreciation and thanks to Soumya Madam for organizing this CME, wonderful CME. For today's CME. Madam Soumya, thank you sincerely, and my appreciation to Soumya Madam, sir. Thank you all, one and all. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasant. Thank you, Vasant. Thank you. Good evening. Wonderful evening. Enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Soumya Madam, thank you very much. Soumya Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supriya, thank you, ma. Thank you.
Thank you
Soumya
all.
Madam. Soumya Madam, please.
Soumya Madam,
Yeah.
anything you want to say?
Thank
Madam,
you,
Soumya?
doctor. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Soumya Madam. Hi.
Thank you, Vasant. Wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless everyone. Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Be safe. Thank you. Thank you.